The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home, the wipers of my old Volvo working overtime. I'm Barnaby, 44, an IT consultant, and I live in a quiet suburb of Seattle. Life had been comfortable, predictable, maybe too predictable. My wife Leonie and I had been married for 18 years. We had a nice house, a couple of cars, and a daughter, Willow, who was away at college. Lately, though, something felt off. Leonie, a freelance graphic designer, had been working late a lot. She'd always been dedicated to her work, but this was different. She was more secretive, always taking calls in another room, and her phone was perpetually glued to her hand. When I asked her about it, she'd brush it off, saying it was just a big project with a demanding client. I wanted to believe her, but a gnawing feeling in my gut told me otherwise. The first real red flag came a few weeks ago. I was doing laundry and found a receipt in Leonie's jeans pocket. It was from a fancy restaurant downtown, a place we hadn't been to in years. The date was last Tuesday, the same night Leonie had told me she was working late. I confronted her about it and she stammered, saying she'd gone out with a client to discuss the project. But something about her demeanor felt rehearsed. Then there was the perfume. Leonie always wore the same scent, a light floral fragrance. But lately, I'd been catching a whiff of something different, a musky, almost masculine cologne. I asked her about it and she said it must have been from someone she'd been sitting next to at a coffee shop. Again, it felt like a lie. I tried to ignore the doubts creeping into my mind. I loved Leonie. We had a good life together. I didn't want to believe she was capable of betraying me. But the signs were becoming impossible to ignore. One evening, Leonie said she had to go to a conference out of town for a few days. She seemed excited about it, almost too excited. I offered to drive her to the airport, but she insisted on taking a taxi. That was strange. She always appreciated a ride to the airport. After she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to distract myself, but my mind kept racing. Finally, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I decided to snoop. I knew Leonie's phone password. It was our anniversary date. I waited until late when I knew she'd be asleep, and then I grabbed her phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking as I unlocked it. I went straight to her messages. There were several recent conversations with an unknown number. My heart pounded in my chest as I opened the first one. The messages were explicit. They were filled with suggestive language, intimate details, and promises of secret rendezvous. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. The messages were clearly from someone Leonie was having an affair with. I scrolled through the messages, my stomach churning with each new revelation. The affair had been going on for months. They'd been meeting at hotels, restaurants, and even our own house when I was at work. The messages were filled with lies Leonie had told me, excuses she'd used to sneak away and be with him. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning. I stumbled out of the bedroom and into the living room, collapsing onto the couch. I sat there for hours, staring blankly at the wall, trying to process what I'd just learned. Leonie, the woman I loved, the woman I'd built a life with, had been lying to me for months. She'd been betraying me in the most intimate way possible. I felt like my entire world had been turned upside down. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a deep sense of dread. I knew I couldn't pretend everything was okay. I had to confront Leonie. I had to know why. When Leonie returned from her conference, she seemed happy and relaxed. She walked in the door with a bright smile, ready to tell me all about it. But when she saw the look on my face, her smile faltered. "What's wrong, Barnaby?" she asked, her voice laced with concern. I didn't say anything. I just held up her phone and pointed to the messages. Her face turned white. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I know everything, Leonie," I said, my voice trembling with anger and hurt. "I know about the affair. I know about the lies. I know about him." She burst into tears. "Barnaby, I can explain," she sobbed. "Explain what, Leonie?" I said, my voice rising. "Explain how you could betray me like this. Explain how you could lie to my face for months. Explain how you could risk everything we've built together for some cheap thrill." She tried to reach out to me, but I recoiled. I couldn't bear to be touched by her. "I'm so sorry, Barnaby," she said, her voice choked with tears. "It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It just happened." I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You didn't mean for it to go this far. You were sending him explicit messages, meeting him in secret, and lying to me every step of the way. How much further did you think it would go? She didn't have an answer. She just stood there, crying, her face a mask of guilt and shame. Who is he, Leonie? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Who is this man you've been sleeping with? She hesitated for a moment, then finally said, It's Tristan. From work, Tristan. One of her colleagues. I'd met him a few times. He seemed like a nice enough guy. But apparently he was also a snake. How could you, Leonie? I said, my voice breaking. How could you do this to me? How could you do this to us? She didn't have an answer. She just kept crying, her body shaking with sobs. I couldn't stand to look at her anymore. I turned and walked out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I drove aimlessly for hours, the rain still coming down, blurring the lights of the city. I didn't know where I was going or what I was going to do. All I knew was that I couldn't stay in that house, not with Leonie, not with the memories of her betrayal. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. I checked in, went to my room, and collapsed on the bed. I lay there for hours, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I thought about Leonie, about our life together, about all the things we'd shared. I thought about Willow, our daughter, and how this would affect her. I thought about Tristan, the man who had stolen my wife, the man who had destroyed my marriage. I felt a surge of anger, a burning desire for revenge. I wanted to hurt them, to make them pay for what they'd done to me. But I knew that revenge wouldn't solve anything. It wouldn't undo the past, and it wouldn't bring back the life I'd lost. I knew I had to make a decision. I could try to forgive Leonie, to work through our problems, to rebuild our marriage. But I didn't know if I could. The trust was gone, shattered into a million pieces. I didn't know if I could ever look at her the same way again, or I could walk away. I could end our marriage, start a new life, and try to find happiness on my own. The thought of leaving Leonie, of abandoning our life together, was terrifying. But the thought of staying with her, of living with the constant reminder of her betrayal, was even more terrifying. I spent the next few days in the motel, weighing my options, trying to figure out what to do. I talked to a few friends, seeking their advice, but ultimately the decision was mine. Finally, I made up my mind. I knew what I had to do. I went back to the house. Leonie was there waiting for me. She looked tired and haggard, her eyes red and swollen from crying. Barnaby, please, she said, her voice pleading. Let's talk. Let's try to work this out. I shook my head. It's too late, Leonie, I said, my voice flat. I can't forgive you. I can't trust you. I can't stay with you. Her face crumpled. No, Barnaby, please don't do this, she begged. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll quit my job. I'll do whatever it takes. It's not about that, Leonie, I said. It's about the trust. You broke it, and I don't think I can ever fix it. I told her I wanted a divorce. I told her I was going to move out. I told her I wanted her to leave Tristan and try to rebuild her life. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, staring at me, her eyes filled with despair. I packed my bags and left the house. As I drove away, I looked back one last time. Leonie was standing in the doorway, watching me go. Her face was a mask of sadness and regret. I felt a pang of guilt, a twinge of doubt. Was I making the right decision? Was I throwing away a life that could still be salvaged? But I knew in my heart that I was doing the right thing. I couldn't stay with Leonie. I couldn't live with the betrayal. I had to move on, to start over, to find a new life for myself. The divorce was messy and painful. There were lawyers, court dates, and bitter arguments, but eventually it was finalized. I moved into a small apartment downtown and started to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. I was lonely, depressed, and filled with self-doubt. But I persevered. I threw myself into my work. I spent time with friends, and I started to explore new hobbies. I even started dating again. It was awkward and uncomfortable at first, but eventually I met someone new, someone who made me laugh, someone who made me feel alive again. Her name was Eliana. She was kind, intelligent, and beautiful. She was also divorced, so she understood what I'd been through. Eliana and I fell in love. We got married a year later. It was a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by our closest friends and family. Leonie wasn't invited. I never heard from Tristan again. I assume Leonie dumped him after I left. I don't know what happened to him, and frankly, I don't care. Leonie, on the other hand, tried to contact me a few times. She sent me emails, left me voicemails, and even showed up at my apartment unannounced. But I refused to see her or talk to her. I'd moved on. I'd found happiness again. I wasn't going to let her back into my life to ruin it. One day, I received a letter from Leonie. It was a long, rambling letter filled with apologies, regrets, and pleas for forgiveness. She said she was sorry for what she'd done, that she'd made a terrible mistake, and that she still loved me. I read the letter, but I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anger, sadness, or even pity. I just felt indifference. I crumpled up the letter and threw it in the trash. I was done with Leonie. I was done with the past. I was ready to embrace the future. Years passed. Eliana and I built a wonderful life together. We traveled the world, we bought a house in the country, and we filled our lives with love and laughter. One day, I received a phone call from Willow, my daughter. She was calling to tell me that Leonie had passed away. I was shocked and saddened by the news. Despite everything that had happened, Leonie was still my daughter's mother. I felt a sense of loss, a sense of closure. I attended Leonie's funeral. It was a small, private affair. Only a few people were there. Willow, some of Leonie's friends, and a few of her colleagues. Tristan wasn't there. After the funeral, Willow came up to me. She hugged me tightly and thanked me for being there. "Mom always regretted what she did, Dad," she said, her voice choked with emotion. "She never stopped loving you." I didn't say anything. I just held her close. I don't know if Leonie ever truly regretted her actions. I don't know if she ever truly loved me. But I do know that her betrayal changed my life forever. It was a painful, traumatic experience, but it also taught me a valuable lesson, that I am stronger than I thought I was, that I am capable of surviving even the most devastating heartbreak, and that I deserve to be happy. And in the end, that's exactly what I found. Happiness. With Eliana. A happiness that Leonie could never take away from me.